Hey there, thanks for tuning into Duck Bricks. I'm Chris, and today we have the entirety of the August 1st, 2025 LEGO Marvel Superheroes Summer Wave. I have a lot of thoughts on these sets. Of course, you've got the new Age of Ultron Quinjet. You have the brand new Spider-Man comics-based sets with Oscorp in Peter Parker's apartment. There's a lot to like here, but there's also a lot of really overpriced items here as well. So join me for an early review at every single one of the brand new Summer 2025 LEGO Marvel sets, and let me know in the comments which ones are you most excited for. Okay, so here we have the entirety of the Summer 2025 LEGO Marvel Wave, comprising of a couple of comics-based Spider-Man sets, a few MCU sets, and one bust. We have, in order of set number, 76317 Peter Parker's apartment for $55, 76319 Captain America vs. Thanos for $40, 76320 Iron Man and War Machine vs. Hammer Drones for $23, 76321 Spider-Man vs. Doc Ock Subway Train Scene for $55, 76322 Avengers Endgame Thor vs. Chitauri for $55, 76324 Spider-Man vs. Oscorp for $140, 76325 Avengers Age of Ultron Quinjet for $130, and then finally 76326 the Iron Spider-Man Bust, retailing for $60. Altogether, this is a pretty eclectic wave of LEGO Marvel. There isn't one single focus on a movie or show or even an animated series. Instead, they're kind of just doing a ton of different things at once, which is kind of a return to form for Marvel in some ways, in the fact that we are finally getting more comics-based LEGO sets that actually are fairly substantial in their builds, and give us, for one of the first times this year, modular Marvel buildings, providing a setting to pose your minifigures and stage battles in, instead of having just vehicles over and over again. Altogether, based on the composition of this wave, I actually really liked they're trying new things. Unfortunately, the prices of this wave are kind of all over the place. Some of the prices aren't that bad, like the Age of Ultron Quinjet, which is still fairly high for what it is, but at least you feel like you're getting close to your money's worth, while other sets are some of the most overpriced sets this entire year. $55 for 373 pieces for the Thor vs. Chitauri set is absolutely bonkers. It's maybe even worse price than the notoriously overpriced LEGO Star Wars Battle Pack releasing at the same time. And you have to wonder what exactly happened with the prices for Marvel this year in particular. This is a very strange wave. There's a lot of different things to see, so I really wanted to focus in on each set individually and share my thoughts on every single one of the sets of the wave, because it is very hard to classify this wave as a whole because there's just so much different subject material that they're focusing on. And so let's go ahead and jump into our look at the brand new LEGO Marvel Summer 2025 Mega Review. First off, we're going to jump in with a set that was personally very interesting to me. This is part of the Infinity Saga, and it is the Age of Ultron Quinjet. The set retails for $130 and comes with 1,131 pieces, as well as a couple of exclusive minifigures, specifically Quicksilver making a return from 2015, and Ultron from the movie also making a first appearance since 2015 for this particular variation. We do have the return of the Age of Ultron version of Hawkeye, which came in the Age of Ultron diorama, strangely enough the wrong version of Black Widow, including the version of her from the Avengers 1 movie and Civil War instead of the outfit that she wore during this scene in Age of Ultron, which was literally made last year and is still in production. It also does include, thankfully, the right version of Iron Man in his armor for this particular part of the movie, so that is a good thing, but very strange how one of the minifigures is just objectively wrong when they have the actual correct version made. Taking a look at the main ship though, this is maybe my favorite version of the Quinjet ever. My buddy Jonathan, aka Mini Superheroes Today, did a comparison video showcasing all the different Quinjets combined, and by looking at them all spread out together, I have to say this absolutely looks the best in my opinion. The color scheme is absolutely phenomenal. I love how most of the detail is brick built instead of being stickered or having an over-reliance on showing different colors by stickers or just decals. They're actually brick building all of the different bits and pieces of color striping along the wings. The bits of red, the light gray, the dark blue, it absolutely looks phenomenal as a build. And that is one of my favorite things about this set, is just how good it looks on display. And that's a really cool thing about this model for me. While it is obviously meant to be played with by kids, it absolutely is also meant to be a display model, and it really bridges the gap very nicely between being a display piece as well as being something that is just very swooshable and fun for kids to play with. Some of my favorite details include the studs on the side mounting of the angled tile elements for the intakes on the jet, and the fact that they're very consistent in the color scheme showcasing the exhaust engines. They're using the coral color to represent kind of the inner core of the fire or jet engine fuel bursting through the exhaust, and that's a detail that is remarkably consistent throughout the entire model. In fact, if you look at the underside of the model, where you can see it's mounted on a stand where you can rotate the ship back and forth thanks to a friction gear, you'll notice that there are these special stickered elements of these transparent flap pieces, which is something that you can see in the actual movie, showcasing the jet engine exhausts underneath them. It's a very subtle detail and not one that you're going to see all the time, but I really appreciate the attention to detail even on the underside of the craft. It reminds me of some of the phenomenal builds they've done for the Guardians of the Galaxy ships over the years, where the underside of the model looks almost as good as the top in some cases. While that is the only detail featured here and the rest of it is mostly the underside of studs, I do appreciate the usage there, and again, you can see the color scheme is consistent, utilizing that coral color with transparent blue over it to showcase the jet engine exhausts. Moving on to the overall shaping of the model itself, one of the interesting things the entire model does is have the front half of the cockpit be mounted forwards at a very slight rake and a slight angle. It's a super subtle design detail, but one that really makes it feel very angular and sleek, and that's something I really do appreciate about the way the model looks. It isn't just utilizing your standard studs up system. There are very subtle angles being used to make the cockpit be slightly more forward mounted and making the entire model feel like it's curving forwards. And of course, you do have the option to curve the wings up as well on a series of hinges, which is something that we've seen on prior versions of the Quinjet, but is also integrated really slickly and cleanly in here. Here's another look at those engine intakes I was talking about with those really nice tile elements mounted on the side, and thankfully the windscreen is printed in this model, so you don't have to worry about applying transparent stickers to the windscreen. It is fully printed as an exclusive element of this piece. Moving onwards to the inside of the cockpit, you can simply remove the cockpit for access into the interior of the model. There's seating for several minifigures. There's a pilot seat, kind of a middle section, and then a couple of seats in the back, so you can actually seat a number of minifigures in here, which is really nice. You can see the alert sticker featuring Ultron, and then another look at the way the cockpit itself is hinged, with studs in the side techniques used for the front, as well as hinges connecting everything at a slight angle. The other sticker on the side showcases the Quinjet, kind of the top-down profile there, so it's a nice little engineering display. And then of course you can zoom on inwards into the cockpit, and then there's a very simple transparent targeting reticle sticker, which you can see mounted there. The back of the Quinjet does open up, and just like in the movie, you can kind of deploy your minifigures out of the back ramp, which is a nice touch. Unfortunately, it doesn't quite fit the motorcycle included for Black Widow in the back there. It's a bit of a tight squeeze, but with the minifigure mounted, there's just no way it's rolling out, so you can't really copy that feature, which the older one actually did have. You could drop the motorcycle down, but all things considered, I'm definitely more happy just having the aesthetics be prioritized here rather than a play feature, which maybe you're only going to use a couple of times. Here's what the 3 minifigures included in the set look like, featured inside the Quinjet, and then the 2 other flying minifigures can be flying on the stand, so there actually is pretty nice adequate space for all the different characters, even though when the cockpit is fully closed up, you can really only see one of them inside. It's just a nice detail for play, but not really something that adds too much to the display of the model. Moving onwards, you can see that the entire Quinjet itself has a back roof section which can be fully removed, and the Quinjet itself just pops right off the stand. It's really only attached by a couple of studs and studs mounted on pins, so it can really easily just slide in and out, and it is a really nice touch. It's quite secure once it's in place thanks to gravity, but then you can very easily remove it as well, and the stand itself is really nicely done. Overall, I do want to start summing up my thoughts on this set by taking a look at the value of this model. This retails for 130 US dollars, 120 euros, and comes with 1,131 pieces, which on paper is a little more expensive than it should be, but to be completely honest, I actually think that it's alright value, especially compared to everything else in the wave. If you look at the other sets in the wave, this is actually one of the more reasonably priced sets, which is unfortunate to say. I will say that. I'm not necessarily excusing higher prices because everything else around it is even more expensive, but I will have to say that for everything you do get, I'm actually fairly okay with the value here. In 2023, we got the Quinjet based off of the first Avengers movie, and that one only had 795 pieces, but retailed for 100 US dollars. So technically, this is even better value than that. And even going all the way back to the last large-scale Quinjet we got for Avengers Endgame in 2019, that one was $80 for 838 pieces. So we're all kind of in the realm of reasonability here. Moving on to the minifigures, we have Iron Man Mark 43, which is the suit of armor that he wore throughout Age of Ultron. We actually previously got this minifigure in the Age of Ultron battle last year, and it is good to get it again. Technically, in the scene in the movie that the Quinjet appears in, he was actually wearing a slightly newer version of the armor, the Mark 45, which they did do for the original 2015 Age of Ultron sets, but they've just chose to reuse the Mark 43 here. But I'm more okay with it because at least this one did appear in Age of Ultron itself, so given that this set is a celebration of Age of Ultron as a whole, I'm more okay with it than I am with some other minifigures in this set. Now, for the first time since 2015, we are getting a movie version of Ultron. They haven't resurrected the mold they used for the upper part of his head, but I actually think this is even more screen accurate than the older one. It almost is the perfect form for Ultron based on his appearance in the final battle of that movie, and I really appreciate it. It's a little strange to get a couple of different versions of Ultron in the same year, the first one coming in the Iron Man mech, which is comics based, but I'm really happy with this particular design. It's super accurate to the MCU, the facial expression is absolutely perfect, and it just looks a lot better than the older version because they really spent a lot of time to try to capture his likeness in the movie. So altogether, easily one of the standout figures of the set for me. Moving on from that, we have Hawkeye here, and Hawkeye is returning from 2024's Age of Ultron battle. He is using the suit that he did wear throughout the Age of Ultron movie, so I'm pretty happy to see that one being used. It is the correct suit, so LEGO does in fact know that they can use the suits from that diorama in this set, so it is nice to get it. Overall, it's a pretty good design for the character. I think the hairpiece they introduced in the Disney Marvel CMF series, which was very good, is used to great effect here, and I do like the printing on the torso and back of the torso as well. It just looks really good for Hawkeye, so not really anything to complain about. Quicksilver, on the other hand, is a very strange update compared to the original. They're reusing the more generic Bucky face that they introduced earlier this year, where clearly that head was made to just be a generic face, but I don't know, I don't really feel like it fits the character that well. The hairpiece is also a very strange choice. It's a white recolor of the Han Solo hairpiece, which doesn't really look that much like it does in the movie, and really the only good thing about it is that, well, it's been 10 years since our last one, and the outfit actually is pretty decently accurate compared to what it looks like in the movie. It just is a series of baffling figure choices otherwise though. And moving on, speaking of baffling figure choices, it makes absolutely no sense to me as to why Black Widow is in the wrong outfit in this set. They literally made one, it's in production for the Age of Ultron version of Black Widow. The only explanation I can even think of is that they wanted to keep a couple of the figures exclusive to that set, but even then, I don't think that's a good enough argument because this set is literally supposed to be based off of Age of Ultron. It says so on the box and all the other figures are from Age of Ultron, so I really don't understand why they're using the objectively wrong Black Widow minifigure. It's not like there's a discontinued version that they don't make anymore, they made it last year, so very, very strange inclusion. Altogether, for $130, despite the complaints that I do have, I actually do like this set a lot. I think it is, again, the best Quinjet we have ever gotten, and it does feel like a reasonably good value for the price. I just wish that there were a couple of updated minifigure choices. Quicksilver is a weird one to me. It would have been good to get a new version of Iron Man Mark 45, because that's the one that he actually wears in this part of the movie, and of course, The Black Widow is just the wrong figure. So minifigure wise, kind of weak, kind of strange, but that is absolutely not news when it comes to Marvel. Unfortunately, Marvel sets have been suffering from some pretty underdeveloped and under-detailed minifigs, and I actually did a whole video on my problems with the whole Marvel theme a few months ago, and while this wasn't even revealed by then, it absolutely falls under the same complaints I had in that video, where it just seems like there's a lot of cost cutting happening for a lot of the Marvel sets minifigures wise. With that though, we have summed up my look at the Age of Ultron Quinjet, and now we can move on to the next set. This right here is our largest comics-based set of the wave. 76324 is simply titled Spider-Man vs. Oscorp. It comes with 808 pieces and for some reason retails for $140 US or 130 euros, which makes absolutely no sense to me, and the sad thing is it's not even the most overpriced set of this entire wave. This is continuing the mini modular system that they introduced for Marvel with the Across the Spider-Verse set earlier this year, but it's also the same modular building system they used for Lego Monkey Kid, right down to the same exact placement of the Technic pins, so if you wanted to, you could actually combine those two types of settings and have a giant street made out of them. It's a similar system they used for some of the smaller mini modulars for Creator 3-in-1 as well, and these are very reminiscent of that style of building. Altogether, I for one am very happy that LEGO Marvel is introducing some more location-based sets, as opposed to just putting out vehicle after vehicle. I long since have been saying that one of my favorite LEGO Marvel sets ever was the Web Warriors Bridge Battle, because it actually focused on a New York location to do battle in, and this is kind of along the same vein. Having locations where you can have your minifigures be posed around is a ton of fun. The set comes with a couple of side builds, the first of which is a very simple motorcycle for Miles Spin Morales, and you can see here that it is a very standard build. It's utilizing the same motorcycle elements that they've been using for ever since the Batman movie sets, where they introduced that piece to use for the wheels. So honestly, not too much I have to say about it, although I do like the lightning motif on the back, hinting at his powers. Moving on to the main buildings here, this is of course a modular system, so while this is the recommended configuration that you can see on the box and the manuals, you can really organize this whichever way you want. I'm going to split these up and take each building one at a time, starting off with the Mini Mart. The Mini Mart itself isn't necessarily a reference to anything in particular, but it's the closest to the mart that appears in the Venom movies, and of course with Eddie Brock's apartment directly above it, it kind of makes sense that it is somewhat thematically tied to Venom, given that it's a common destination that he visits in the movies. Inside Eddie Brock's apartment here, you can see a chicken for Venom to eat, a security camera on the side, as well as a nice sticker showcasing the different types of Venom, like you've got Anti-Venom there, kind of a green diversion, and of course Spider-Man's hood on a dartboard, because of course he is a major enemy of Spider-Man. On the top here you have just a very simple roof. One thing I do like about these buildings are the inclusions of lots of different Technic axle elements to allow you to stick in different pieces to pose your minifigures, and the set does come with a series of printed tiles showcasing famous comic covers recreated as Daily Bugle newspaper fronts. So you have Spider-Man No More there with the spider hood in the garbage, and of course an empty garbage bin directly against it. Moving on to the next building, we have another civilian building, and this is the jewelry store, of course titled Marvelous Jewelry. The 1964 building number is a reference to Amazing Spider-Man Annual Number 1, which came out in 1964, even though Spider-Man himself was introduced in Amazing Fantasy in August of 1962. Moving on to the inside of the jewelry store, we actually have a small play feature here where turning a lever allows you to shatter a window and allow somebody to steal the precious gems inside. Otherwise, to be honest, the interior is fairly sparse. There's not that much going on, although I do like the inclusion of some shattered glass on the pavement there, which suggests the fate of the window. Another cool detail I like is the security camera on the top here, which is utilizing a relatively newer element introduced earlier this year for LEGO Friends. It's a new cover light element, this time in the transparent black color, and it works really well for a security camera. The second level can be removed, so you can swap that out with maybe other future upper floors of buildings should LEGO continue this modular system, and here this is meant to be Miles Morales' apartment. So you've got a special spray can there, you've got a design showcasing him painted on the board, and a simple bed as well. There's a small little feature here with a red lever on the side, which honestly, I was expecting was going to do a lot more than what it does, but basically what it does is just lower this trapdoor, which allows you access to the roof if you wish to open up this roof element. There isn't really that much going on there, and I question the need to even have this be integrated as a function. I certainly was expecting something a bit more explosive out of that, like the feature they have in Peter Parker's apartment, the other modular apartment from this series, which has the bricks kind of smash and explode outwards, but honestly, it's okay for what it is, just not really that interesting as a build. I would say for me, the most interesting part of this build is easily Oscorp Tower itself, and this has the most going on when it comes to the building, which makes sense given that it's the set's namesake. I honestly kinda wish that some of the part budget just went into depicting a much larger Oscorp Tower, maybe with a more detailed interior, something closer to the Avengers Tower playsets that we got in 2015 and 2020, but this is still okay for what it is, and it's good to get different bits and pieces of a city street they probably wouldn't sell separately on their own. Starting off with the ground floor here, you have a sliding glass door which kind of opens and closes at a very simple mechanism there. You have a Green Goblin override sign which can be smashed and broken off, which we'll showcase in a second, and on the ground floor you have a very simple reception desk and the quintessential LEGO Marvel fire hydrant. The second floor showcases them experimenting on the symbiote, where clearly some of it has escaped outwards. You also have an experiment being done on the spider, there's a couple syringes in the box there, and pushing this Technic lever out allows you to smash open the Green Goblin override sign. It's a really simple play feature, but honestly one that works really well. And of course, you do have Green Goblin himself flying around on the outside. Perhaps he was the one that caused the explosion to his own building. Moving on from there, we can go up to the next level, and that is the Green Goblin's workshop. There's a little space for you to park his glider, which is a nice touch, and of course, you can see him experimenting on the Green Goblin bombs, which he is wielding in the set. One very nice thing that they've introduced for 2025 is instead of previous years where the flame piece was directly glued onto the bomb head itself, or the minifigure head, this time they have made it its own separate piece, so you can actually use the flaming headpiece for a ton of other characters. And finally, on the top floor, we have Norman Osborn's office, where you can see that you have Times Scare as the reference there on the Daily Bugle newspaper, Green Goblin Override on the computer screen, and a minifigure for Norman Osborn himself, plus a transformation feature, which allows you to place Norman inside the chamber and turn him into the Green Goblin. This is a very simple feature that we've seen throughout a ton of other LEGO sets, obviously popularized with Batman turning into Bruce Wayne, and this one is no different. It is maybe one of the most simplistic versions where you just spin the crane on the top, and then you can see on one side you have Norman Osborn, but on the other side he's gone on sabbatical, and you have the Green Goblin instead. I like the stickers on the side here, which showcase it's a restricted area. The entire thing is locked down, so you can kind of imagine that he's going into here and emerging as the Green Goblin, even though I do wish that there was one other feature which allowed you to kind of open it up from the side, maybe have the side of the building open up and let Green Goblin jump out, especially because it looks like those are hatches meant to open. On the top of the building, there's actually a very simple but clever play feature. It's Spider-Man attached to one of his webs, and you can see that since the web itself is attached to the mechanism, you can kind of mimic him swinging through the city if you get the swing just right. It takes a few tries, and you can't really maintain a continuous swing because he's just going to be hitting the sides of the buildings, but they haven't really incorporated a Spider-Man swinging feature built into a building as far as I know before, so this is actually a really cool feature to allow you to play and act some of his action battles through the city. And of course, if you have Green Goblin mounted on the bottom part there, you can actually have Spider-Man jump off the building and then jump into him. So that is also another play feature there, just with the way that this is built. Altogether, I actually really like the architectural design of the silhouette of Oscorp Tower. You can see that it has a very unique design with this angular aesthetic. There are these sharp wedges and angles pointing upwards for the tower itself, and of course that Goblin glider is now mounted in place where it should be. The interior of Oscorp is relatively small, but I feel like they've covered pretty much every single scene in a mini version of Oscorp I would want to see. You've got the Norman transformation, you have the symbiote being experimented on, you have Green Goblin's workshop, and Norman's office, so there really isn't much more to ask for where this is concerned. Now, I do want to briefly showcase the modularity aspect here, specifically with the other modular set included in the wave, which is Peter Parker's apartment. Strangely enough, Peter Parker's apartment is the only one that doesn't have a sidewalk built in. More on that for the individual review on that set, so it does look a little awkward when you have the buildings all combined and lined up. It just feels like there's a piece missing, but unfortunately that is just how it is. I think it was just maybe a miscommunication between designers here, but if you ignore the fact that it doesn't have a sidewalk, that's not a fault of this set after all. They actually do look pretty good on display next to each other. It really feels like these are part of a larger city, and that's something I really do appreciate. Of course, there are multiple different configurations that you could do here. When you connect it up to the mini mart, one thing you have to do is remove the security camera on the side, and of course you can kind of just place that somewhere else on the building should you please, but it is a little weird to have something sticking out of the side that you just have to remove for the modularity aspect. Altogether though, I think that this is a really fun play feature. I love it when LEGO sets are modular between each other, and I think it's a really smart idea to have a collectible range of sets giving you different buildings in the Marvel universe. I can imagine like a Nelson and Murdoch office would be really cool. Even getting a smaller Avengers Tower or Baxter building in the style of this set would be awesome additions to the lineup, and there's a ton of iconic LEGO Marvel buildings. The Sanctum Sanctorum could be another one they could do just like this. So altogether, I think that this is a really promising system. I think there's a lot of things they can do with it, and you can see the modularity happening on screen right now. I just hope that they do plan to keep them all consistent and prevent mistakes like the Peter Parker's apartment not having a sidewalk from really happening again. Moving onwards though, I do have to talk about the price and value here, because this again retails for 140 US dollars or 130 euros, but only comes with 808 pieces. Sure, some of those pieces are large, like you have the large Stein with a big sticker on it that says Oscorp, but honestly, this set should not be anywhere close to 140. I think $90 would honestly be pushing it for a set like this. Maybe $100 I could see with the amount of minifigures, with the amount of new minifigures as well, although really if you think about it, we only technically get like 3 or 4 new minifigures. Kraven the Hunter is a new print, the new version of Green Goblin is great, Eddie Brock is really just using pre-existing parts, but it is a nice unique minifig to get, and same as Norman Osborn, and all the other Spider minifigures have appeared in other sets. So it's not like the budget was spent on minifigures here, because we only really get a few new prints. It's just very baffling to me that this is $140, and I honestly cannot recommend you pick this up at full price, because the price is just way too high for the amount of stuff you get. Honestly, I would have been very happy for them to like sell Oscorp by itself, just this tower for maybe 50 or 60 bucks. I know that's not how LEGO budgets work. The designers were briefed to make a $140 Oscorp set, but for $140, I just am not seeing the value whatsoever here. With that though, let's take a quick look at all of the different minifigures included in the set, and then we'll wrap up my final thoughts at the end. Starting off with the minifigures, we have the Green Goblin. This is actually a relatively newer outfit from 2024 in the new Ultimate Universe, which was kind of repurposed Stark tech turned into the Goblin armor, and I find it really interesting how LEGO is actually adapting a very new style of design for this classic character. Green Goblin himself is utilizing a recolored Ninjago Dragon's Rising hood in purple, which is the first time we're getting it in that color, and a brand new set of head print, as well as torso and legs. It's easily my favorite minifigure from this set, and for good reason. It's super detailed, a very unique look for the Green Goblin, and we've gotten a ton of classic comics-based Green Goblins in the past, so it's really cool to have a more high-tech version, especially because this goes alongside Oscorp. As I mentioned, his pumpkin bombs also have the removable flame head piece, which is super cool to get. Finally, as a removable piece, it looks very similar to the original one, but this time you can remove it from the head. Norman Osborn also is a minifigure included in the set, although he is just a kit-bashed figure made of pre-existing pieces, mostly from like the LEGO Harry Potter theme and a couple other themes here and there. I think it works okay for the minifigure itself. He does have an appropriately angry expression on the back of his head, which I think works very well for the character, but honestly, it's not all that interesting. We receive a newly updated version of Kraven the Hunter, and he only just has a brand new torso print. Altogether, the rest of the pieces are pre-existing, using the Doctor Strange head, where I think, honestly, this is a little controversial, but I think it kind of does work for the character. The previous head for Kraven that we got originated in the Jurassic World theme for Vincent D'Onofrio's villain character from the first Jurassic World movie, and I also think that while that was a reuse that did work decently enough for the character, it would be cool to one day get a dedicated head print for him, but honestly, I think this works alright. It's unfortunate to get only plain legs, but it's kind of what we expect from LEGO Marvel nowadays. This is nothing like Ninjago, where literally every single minifigure is absolutely covered in detail. Here, you're lucky to get a new torso print, because this is LEGO Marvel after all. Moving on to the next figure here, we have Eddie Brock, and he is once again utilizing pre-existing parts, but I actually really like the minifigure for what it is. Eddie, we've been turned into a minifigure! And you can see Venom on the back there. It's a very simple build with a neck bracket, a jumper element, and the simple Venom head. He is reusing the newer style of Winter Soldier head they've made, which clearly was made to be a generic kind of head that they can use for multiple different characters. It also was used on Quicksilver in the Quinjet, so obviously they are trying to get the most mileage out of this head as possible. But again, the angry side, I can sort of see that working for a comics-based Eddie Brock. I definitely don't think they needed to make a new head for this character, and it is cool to finally get him in a quote-unquote civilian form, because we've literally never gotten Eddie Brock as a minifigure before. Moving on from that, the rest of the minifigures are unfortunately repeats. Miles Spin Morales does not have the dual molded legs that he has been featured with in a couple of other sets, which is pretty unfortunate, but the rest of the outfit is really nice, especially with that dark red hoodie piece. I really do like the look of this figure. On the same vein, moving on from Spin, we have Spider-Woman, who strangely reappears this year, but without the dual molded legs that she first had in her first set appearance. I don't really understand why LEGO Marvel seems to be downgrading their minifigures. It must be a budget thing, because dual molded legs cost just that much more than regular legs, but it is so baffling to me because it seems to only happen to LEGO Marvel. You don't really see these obvious budget cuts in really any other theme, so it is very disappointing to see. Otherwise, it's a decent minifigure, just don't know why they made it objectively worse. Ghost Spider or Spider-Gwen here is a decent figure, although it is getting a little bit old at this point. We've seen this figure in a ton of different sets, but I think the design is alright. I'm certainly excited for the future Spider-Verse CMF version though, because that one is looking a lot better. Moving onwards, we have the standard Spider-Man minifigure. No dual molded legs, which is unfortunate, but he does have printing on the arms, which is quite nice. I do like how LEGO tends to kind of alternate between having printing on the arms or having dual molded legs. They kind of try to do something a bit different for every single Spider-Man, so I think this one is alright as the current incumbent Spider-Man, but honestly, not my personal favorite. And with that, we have summed up my look at the Oscorp building here. It's a very overpriced set in my opinion, doesn't really make sense that it's $140, but if you set the price aside, I actually do like it as a modular building. I think it does genuinely have a good amount of different things to offer for fans of LEGO Marvel, or just fans of LEGO sets being modular with each other within the same theme. That's all I have to say for this one, so now let's move on to the next set. Continuing our look at the modular Marvel buildings, we have Peter Parker's apartment. It retails for $55 or 50 euros and comes with 394 pieces. It's at number 76317 and it includes 4 different minifigures. Anti-Venom already appeared in a set earlier this year, and the same for Spider-Man, but we actually do get 2 new figures in the form of Hobgoblin and a new version of comics-based MJ, which we haven't gotten in years. All around the building, there are nice references to different Spider-Man pieces of history, like the Daily Bugle Menace cover, which clearly is a nod to his very first appearance in Amazing Fantasy, and there's actually a pretty interesting play feature on the roof of the building as well, for Hobgoblin to attack Peter Parker in his home. On the side, there's all sorts of studs to pose your minifigures, and it does come with a small side build as well. It's a little remote controlled or maybe some sort of a mini spider mech. Honestly, this one doesn't really do that much for me. It's kind of an awkward build, and I don't really like it that much, but it is nice to get some sort of a smaller side build, so Spider-Man isn't just completely on his own when facing off against Hobgoblin on his glider. Moving on to the main building though, there's one thing that you might notice that is very strange about this set, and that while it is intended to fit within the modular Marvel building system, as I showcased in my review of the Oscorp Tower, it doesn't have a sidewalk. It's one of the only ones that just doesn't have a sidewalk, and I don't really understand why that would be the case. I really think that there was just a miscommunication between the people designing this and the people designing the other sets, and they didn't realize it was supposed to have 2 extra studs on the front of the building. Otherwise, there's just no explanation as to why that's the case. The play feature though, on the other hand, is actually really nicely integrated. It's a way to cause the front half of the building to explode, and once it's actually in place, it doesn't even look like it's meant to break, but from the front, when you push it on the back here, you can see that very clearly it is meant to be some sort of exploding feature, and that's something I really appreciate about the set. Despite it being a standard building, there's actually a different unique thing that you can do to make it feel more like a playset within the Marvel Universe. Starting off with the ground floor here, you have some pretty simple designs. You've got a couple of sprinklers, or some places for like spiders to be mounted or Spider-Man to climb around the actual apartment. There's a kitchen with a pizza time box, as well as a sink and a place to cook, as well as an office on the top of the building, which is also supposed to be Peter Parker's bedroom, where he has about as much space as you would expect someone to have in New York, where literally his bed is currently folded up here, showcasing a comics-based Iron Spider suit, a minifigure I would love to see again, given that it's been years since we got our last one. There's a reference to the Oscorp Tower from the same wave as a sticker on the side there, and of course his bed folds down with a video game controller on the top. There's a Venom spotted reference on the screen, plus a microscope, which is actually a pretty decent build for a smaller brick-built microscope. I really like it for what it is. It's sitting on top of a box where presumably you can say like maybe this is where he hides the Spider-Man outfit, but unfortunately there's nothing inside the crate itself and you aren't instructed to put anything in. It's really just meant to kind of show how cramped the apartment is, which I think is quite a funny detail for a LEGO set like this. Moving onwards though, honestly there's not that much else to say about the interior of this building. It is very simplistic for what you have, and really the main draw to the build is having that explosion feature, which does work very well. Once again, this is a pretty small set. It's 394 pieces, so just under 400, which is why I do have to wonder why it is $55 US, which feels remarkably high for what you get. Unfortunately, it is not the most egregiously expensive set of the wave. That honor actually goes to another $55 set, but it is egregious enough that I do question as to why they decided to cost it this much, especially when this feels like it could have been a really solid $40 set, maybe $45 at a strong stretch, but I guess of course you can always wait for a sale. The exterior of the building is actually pretty nicely done. I do like the dark blue integration as well as the tan coloration, and the glider for Hobgoblin is really cool as well. I like how it's got the fire motif. You can have it sit at a slightly canted angle forwards by having the wings be angled backwards, and of course you have the flame sticking out of the back as well. The other part I really like is that you have the pumpkin bombs mounted on the sides of the wings, just adding a little bit more to the aesthetic there, and for the first time, these flame elements are not actually glued to the minifig heads. As I mentioned in the Oscorp building review, it is now a removable piece, meaning you can use it for all sorts of different custom minifigures, because I for one really want to make a Dormammu minifigure using that piece. On the side of the building you have one of these rubber web catch elements, and honestly it's a little bit awkward to use. For one, Hobgoblin just straight up does not fit in there because of his cape. I tried quite a few times, and you can see some of my many attempts to actually get him to hold into place inside this web, and I deemed it impossible. Even when you remove the cape itself, it's a little awkward to fit him in with the hood, and it's really only meant to capture a minifigure with no headgear or no other accessories, which kind of limits the usefulness of a web catching piece, but honestly, if they made it any bigger than it already is, it definitely would be even more of an eyesore on the side of the building, so honestly, I can see why the piece was designed the way it was. It's just a little bit awkward that it doesn't really capture a minifigure that well. Of course, Anti-Venom, who is also included in the set, is just your standard minifigure with no sort of extra accessory or even a headgear, so it's perfect for Anti-Venom, but as it is right now, just a bit of a strange inclusion when one of the villains in the set doesn't fit. There's a couple of extra fire elements included on the top of the set as well to mimic the destruction caused by Hobgoblin when he blows up the top half of the building. That's something I do appreciate. You have some extra added detail there, but altogether, this is a very strange set to be priced the way it is. I definitely feel like this could have used a couple more cycles in the development feed here, where you just needed that crosswalk to be there because it looks very awkward when added on to the pre-existing buildings, or maybe there is a way to make it a little bit more unique or a little bit more fully detailed up to justify the $55 price tag, because right now it is a very small building. Moving on to the minifigures, we have our new comics version of MJ. Unfortunately, unlike the last one, which actually came with a really cool tank top with a Spidey heart symbol on it, this one is just using pre-existing pieces. The torso is used in Yaz from Jurassic World, and the headpiece is a very generic female angry and smile headpiece we've seen on literally dozens of minifigures before, so not super exciting to get as a figure, but cool to get a new comics version. Hobgoblin, on the other hand, is brand new compared to his previous appearance, and I really love the recolor of the Moon Knight hood. It is literally the perfect piece to use for Hobgoblin based on his appearance in the comics, and when I first heard we were getting a Hobgoblin figure, I literally thought there's no way they reuse the Moon Knight hood. It would be really nice if they did, but it might be CMF locked, we haven't seen it in any other themes, and so I was very pleasantly surprised to see them actually use the perfect piece for this character. He does have a dual-sided head there, which very much fits for the character, a new color of the rubberized cape in orange, which I think also fits for the design. And say what you will about the rubber capes, I'm definitely of two minds about it, but I will say that when the capes are rubber, they definitely have a really cool aesthetic flow that you can't really achieve with just a standard fabric cape. The motion in this cape just looks really cool when it's billowing behind him. Overall, you can see he also has his pumpkin bombs that he's wielding, which again have that separatable flame element. I'm very, very happy they figured out a way to make it its own piece and not have it be permanently attached to the head, because there's just so many different things you can do with it. I could even see doing a Kai from Ninjago, Kai Jago, custom minifigure like Energy Kai with the flames in his hair, because it kind of does look like his hairpiece. So there's just a lot of great possibilities you could do with that new hairpiece, and I'm very glad they figured it out. Moving on, we have Anti-Venom as a minifig as well, who already appeared in the Spider-Man mech, so honestly nothing much new to say here. I think it actually is a pretty clean design for a minifigure. I like it for what it is, and for once, for LEGO Marvel, I don't actually think this one really needed any detail on the legs. I think it is just a very clean minifigure by itself, although again it would have been cool to get maybe a different villain other than Anti-Venom. And finally, we have Peter Parker here. There is no civilian Peter Parker, he is just in his Spider-Man suit, and that's one thing I would have loved to see from the set. Maybe some way to change into his Spider-Man outfit, or including both figures, kind of similar to Norman Osborn in the Oscorp set, but I think it is okay for what it is. He's using the same headpiece that he has been using for the Peter Parker appearances throughout a couple of different sets here. That head's been around for a while, and they used it just recently in the Avengers Endgame set, and the Spider-Man minifigure is alright. Dual molded legs would have been really nice, but it is hard to complain about the printing on the side of the arms. Even if the printing for the red on the arms is decidedly a lot darker than it should be with the blue background. Altogether, that about sums up my thoughts on set 76317 Peter Parker's Apartment. $55 is simply too much to pay for a set that comes with 394 pieces, and even though it does come with some new minifigures, only really one of them is brand new. The other one, MJ, you can make out of existing parts. So honestly, I kinda wish they either were able to reduce the cost of the set or just bulk up the apartment a little more. At the very least, add that sidewalk, make it congruent with the rest of the Marvel modulars. It doesn't make sense to me why it doesn't have that. That's all for this review though. Let me know in the comments what you think of the set, and now let's move on to the next item. Next up, we have our next $55 set, and I am not joking when I say this might be the most overpriced set of the entire year. And that is saying quite a lot, because I just reviewed the LEGO Star Wars August Wave. This is 76322 Avengers Endgame Thor vs. Chitauri. It comes with 373 pieces, retails for €50 and $55 US, which is a whopping 14.7 price per part ratio. Now I know price per part is not everything, and I understand there's a lot of other factors that go into a set's value, but having seen what's in front of me here, I do not understand where the value is coming from. You have your standard $10 or maybe $12 LEGO Marvel mech, which is featured here. You have a small side build for the creature here, which couldn't be more than $10. At my most generous, worth of value, you have a couple of Chitauri speeders, okay, maybe those are 5 each, again, very generous, but let's call that 5 each, and then a little stand for Thor, which is another 5. So at most, this shouldn't be more than $35, and that is already being very generous to the set. I don't really understand what happened here. It's not really a very good battle pack, because while it does come with 4 different Chitauri minifigures, which kind of sounds like it could be an endgame battle pack, I mean, you'd also get War Machine, Rocket, and Thor in it, so you don't want to get an army of them, so I don't really understand who this set is made for. What I will say though, is that as a fan of buildable LEGO action figures and construction mechs, I actually kinda like this mech for what it is. I almost wish this was released as its own set like the War Machine mech and Rocket. That could have been a great little 2-pack mech set with Rocket standing on the shoulder with 2 minifigures in one set, and that would have been a really cool set to get, with a great minifigure selection and a very nice bulky Iron Patriot / War Machine armor. I remember sitting in the movie theater watching Endgame and seeing this super cool Iron Patriot armor and going, wow, I cannot wait to get that in a year. And well, now we're 6 years later and we're finally getting it in a LEGO set, but thankfully the minifigure itself doesn't disappoint. I'll highlight the minifigure a little more when we take a look at the minifigures by themselves, but altogether I love the amount of detail factored in. I just think the Iron Patriot design is just such a cool color scheme for an Iron Man suit in general, so I'm a fan of how they pulled this one off. Would it have been better if LEGO introduced a brand new style of figure, similar to Axel from Nexo Knights, which just bulked him up a little bit more instead of having to put him in a mech, which doesn't really make sense for the scale of the characters? Absolutely. I think that would be a lot better, but before LEGO does that, I'm a lot happier just having them do it as mechs, because it's better getting them as mechs versus not getting them at all. Again, I do think I'm in the minority of people who actually kinda like these as playable things because I am very partial towards mechs and action figures. I think a big figure would be better, like some sort of a hybrid between a big fig and a regular fig, but it's still cool to get that as a minifig altogether. Now, for the villain faction here, we have one of the beasts seen in the Avengers Endgame final battle, and this is actually a pretty remarkably posable creature. The headpiece is printed, which makes sense because LEGO has historically always printed that element. It is interesting to see them decide to use that piece fully printed for a creature like this. Don't know if that'll ever appear again, but it kind of reminds me of some of the older style of LEGO pieces, like we used to get race cars with printed decals like that, and altogether, it is, again, remarkably posable. You can move the front and back legs, you can articulate all the fingers and the claws, and technically you can kind of get this to stand up on 2 legs. I don't think it ever really stood up on 2 legs in the movie, but obviously you can use your imagination and just play around with it, and there you have it. Standing up on 2 legs, this kind of becomes a good opponent to the War Machine mech itself. They're around the same scale. Of course, this is not 100% movie accurate. If you actually look at what this looks like in the movie, I think that this is like maybe an okay play scale representation, but it doesn't really look that much like the creatures in the movie. But I agree that those creatures would be kind of hard to depict as a LEGO set in general, especially on a play scale, so I think it's okay for what it is. It almost feels like a mole type of creature with these large hands, these very beady eyes, and I think that definitely works in the favor of it. It really does feel like a unique animal or creature that we, again, have never seen before from LEGO Marvel. The chains with handles on them are obviously meant to have a minifigure ride it, but the chains are unfortunately too short to actually be usable as handles. They're mostly just there for aesthetics, and really they're just there to kind of have them drag along the bottom of the creature as it runs through the battlefield, which I think looks alright. It would have been cool to have a little bit of extra playability to actually have a minifigure sit there and ride and hold the restraints if you actually had those chains reach all the way, but I think it's okay for what it is, especially because, again, in the movie, you rarely saw these being ridden by Chitauri. They kind of just operated on their own. It's a decent, little build. I don't even know if this is as much value as I would give a mech. This is $8 value, let's say that. And again, we will be getting back to the value because I have a lot of thoughts on the value of this set. Again, if you want to have it hold a minifigure on its back, you can actually do that. There are studs on the back where you can place a figure, but then again, you just really can't have those chains reach back at all. Like, it's not even close in the realm of reasonability, so it's really not meant for a minifigure to be riding it. Other than this, there are only a couple of other small side builds in the set, and the side builds are what I would call polybag style side builds. They really are just super bare minimum basic builds with not that much going on, and the first one here is a little bit of landscape for Thor. There's a portal on the side of him, and it's meant to connect up to the larger scale Avengers Endgame final battle, which released earlier this year for $100. Another very overpriced set in my opinion, but it has all the clips necessary to attach. There are barrels there which hold some of the extra ammunition, like the studs used the Chitauri blasters, and there's a little bit of a piece to pose Thor, kind of like he's bursting outwards from a jolt of electricity, but honestly, this is basically your standard polybag fare. Same goes for these Chitauri speeders, which I actually really like. They do feel like reminiscent of Space Police 3 and some of the original LEGO space themes to me in the way they're designed. I just feel like they're very sleek and unique in their design, so I do like them for what they are. They're just really small. I like that we get two of them so we can kind of imagine them swooshing around the battlefield. They do have these stud shooters on the fronts as well, which do look suitably alien in the technology, kind of the way they're integrated into the build, so I think those are nice, but honestly, the Chitauri are a very uninteresting enemy force to me because we have gotten so many of them over the years. They're kind of like the battle droids of Marvel, where they basically are just the standard villain opponent on any Endgame or Avengers 1 style of set, so I think they're okay to get, but just not the most interesting things to me. And so we have to talk about what I think of this set as a whole, because again, on its own, let's throw price out of the window. Let's imagine in a wonderful world, maybe somewhere in the multiverse of madness, this set has a reasonable price. $30. Maybe even 25. And you could get rid of two of the Chitauri, just have two Chitauri versus the two heroes, or the three heroes actually, and make it $30, $25, $30. And I think this could be a very solid battle set. It's not really a battle pack, although it's kind of trying to be one with 4 different Chitauri warriors to face off against your heroes, because obviously you don't want to battle army build Thor and War Machine and Rocket. So if they wanted to do a full-on battle pack, it should have just had Chitauri, but then the set would have been super boring. But all of that is thrown out the window when we remember the price is $55 US. I'm going to share my final thoughts on the price in a second, but I do want to jump into the minifigures really quickly here, starting off with Iron Patriot / War Machine. James Rhodes here is in a really cool design, and I like that we finally got this as a minifigure after literally waiting years to get this depicted in minifigure form. You can flip up the visor, and honestly, I miss the original head they used for War Machine. They used to have one that actually showed like the red around his visor that was literally made for him, and I don't really know why they stopped using it, but otherwise the figure is really cool. We get a new version of Rocket Raccoon in his dark blue and dark red outfit here, and I think it looks pretty good, very accurate to the movie. One thing LEGO did do in themes like Monkey Kid was color the front stripe on the rubberized piece in between the legs so it doesn't break up the color scheme of the minifigure, which I think would have been really nice to just have a line of dark blue coloration on the tail, but obviously that would have cost extra budget, and LEGO Marvel is absolutely one of the themes that is in dire need of budget. For some reason, it's very obvious when it comes to LEGO Marvel that they're really trying to cut corners on the minifigures where possible. Thor is technically new because we have the rubberized cape being used with the lightning torso, which technically originates from Avengers 1 and the first Thor movies, so it doesn't really fit this scene, but honestly, it's close enough to his Endgame appearance that I think it's alright. It's not like Captain America, for instance, where he just clearly is in the wrong outfit, like it looks completely wrong. This one is close enough to what he wore in Endgame that I think it's okay. Stormbreaker has a new brick-built design which actually showcases lightning behind it, which I think is actually pretty cool. I like the addition of the lightning piece behind there to kind of show the lightning emanating from the hammer itself, but altogether, I think this is just an okay minifigure, especially with no leg printing and really nothing that ties it directly into Endgame other than the head with the beard. And of course, we've seen the Chitauri a million times. The set comes with 4 of them, which I guess is nice if you want to army build them, but it is kind of strange just to have 4 of those minifigures in this one set. Altogether, I can sort of see where LEGO is coming from by pricing this at $55. On paper, it has 7 different minifigures. It's almost more of a minifigure pack than it is a playset. But it is very strange to me because most of those minifigures are not that interesting. Nobody really cares that much, as far as I know, about Army building the Chitauri to a great extent. And to be honest, I just feel like $55 is so ridiculously overpriced for a set that literally only has around 300 some pieces that it is just outside of the realm of reasonability altogether. There is no way I can justify paying anywhere close to the full price for this set. And again, while obviously these sets are sent to me by LEGO for free, and I'm very happy with that, and I'm very thankful and grateful for that, it is my job on YouTube to give an honest review, and it would not be in good faith for me to say, hey, LEGO sent me this for free, so I think you should buy it for $55, because that's just not how I operate. If I think this isn't worth it, I will say it, and this is not worth it. So for me personally, I would say wait for a sale. If you're dying to get your hand on the new Iron Patriot minifigure, which, I mean, maybe you were back in 2019, but I don't really know if anybody nowadays is really dying to get that, then maybe it's worth picking up, but honestly, I would say wait for a big sale. That's all I have to say for this set, so let's move on to the next one. Next up, we have another movie-based set, but this is actually based off of the original Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man 2 movie, which is really cool to get a full-on dedicated set in 2025. This is 76321 Spider-Man vs. Doc Ock subway train scene. It retails for $55 and comes with 393 pieces. It also retails for 50 euros if you're curious in the Eurozone. The set comes with 4 different minifigures, a new version of Peter Parker's Spider-Man from that particular scene with an angry and focused face and a ripped suit, Doc Ock, who is brand new for this set as well, J. Jonah Jameson, and Aunt May. So altogether, we're actually getting a pretty nice load of minifigures in this set. Now, here is my thing about the set. I've seen a lot of people online actually really loving this set, and I do like it for what it is, but I do have one major problem with the set, and maybe this is just me, but I really miss the days when LEGO was really primarily focused on sets being fun to play with and being play toys. And I understand anyone who's a really big fan of the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies is probably an adult right now. They're not really going to be like a young kid wanting to play with it, but this is being marketed as a toy for kids. And so, my big question is, where are the play features? The original version of this set, made for the original movie, had a whole track, it had cobwebs that the train could slam into, it literally had bits and pieces of buildings you could kind of rip cobwebs off of, and I thought that was the coolest thing ever as a kid when I got that set. It was top of my wanted list because I wanted to play and act the function. It was super simple, it literally was just kind of like a Technic-based slammer, you push a handle and the train kind of goes down the track and hits a bunch of cobwebs, but it was actually fun to play with. But this set is literally just the subway train car, and the name of the set is very obvious. This is the subway train scene. It's not supposed to be a playset, it's barely supposed to be something for kids, it's literally just meant to be a scene for you to reenact the movie. But then I wonder, well, for $55, you have 393 pieces, why doesn't this have a track? Why doesn't this have some sort of a diorama style set? If you're going to go all the way and make this a depiction of the movie scene, why don't you have it be like an 18+ set with a black box, a whole diorama, maybe a printed movie quote, and then in that case, then it would make a lot more sense to have this as a scene that you can't play with. This to me feels like a bit of an in-between, where obviously it's meant to be posable and playable. You've got the different bricks kind of going alongside the side of the train, and they literally include extra pieces underneath the train that I'm showcasing right now, where you kind of remove some of the plates that you can use to make it such that you can turn the wheels. So obviously, part of it is at least meant for play, but then you have some like strange details like the wheels on the train itself being super detailed. Like you've got some greebling detail on the back side of the train wheels, which I'm certainly not necessarily complaining about, but was that really the best way to spend the parts budget for this $55 set if you didn't even have a track to play with it on? So the wheels turning are basically useless. It really is only for people wanting to add this to a larger diorama. I don't know, I think that I'm definitely being a lot lot more critical on this set than most people. I know a lot of fans online really like this set, and I don't want to take away from that. If you like this set, all the more power to you. Just to me, this feels like a strange amalgam of LEGO trying to do both a play and display set, but not really succeeding at either thing. That's really just my opinion, and I know this is going to be a controversial take, so do let me know in the comments what you think. And again, I know that the people who are really excited about this set are people who grew up watching the original Spider-Man films, which came out in 2002, over 20 years ago. So I understand, obviously you're not necessarily going to be having a ton of kids be really excited about the set, but then I wonder, like, why even make it a kids playset? Like, just do an 18+ set. So altogether, it's a weird one to me. I think it is genuinely pretty good for what it is. Like, it is a decent subway train build. There aren't really that many ways to make it more interesting than it actually is. In theory, you could actually hook this up to another train. You can see that I just showcased that connection there. You just need to kind of connect things with Technic. And of course, it is cool to have Spider-Man be mounted on the front. You have the cobwebs he's using to kind of restrain the rest of the train and hold it back, and you can see the cobwebs snapping behind him. But altogether, it just feels like really expensive, $55, and for what you get, I just feel like it's not that fun to play with, nor is it a very good display model because it doesn't even have any sort of track to display it on. Moving onwards to the minifigures though, before I share my final thoughts on the set, I actually do think the minifigures in the set are pretty good. The face on the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man is so perfect for the character. I was really worried LEGO was going to use a generic head for him again, but they made one specifically for him, and you can kind of pretend like that other expression is maybe like from Spider-Man 3 where he's being super cocky and kind of just grinning and smirking at people. I think both sides of the head really fit for the character, so I really like that aspect of the detail. Having the ripped suit be an exclusive minifigure to this set and this scene in particular is really special, and I love that they managed to maintain the dual molded legs too. So altogether, I'm a big fan of this minifigure. I think this is going to be a really popular one, especially going forwards into the future when people probably will have to get this set just for that figure. Aunt May, on the other hand, is pretty much just utilizing pre-existing pieces, but I think they did a pretty good job with Aunt May. They're using kind of a similar, like, old woman face that they've just had around for a few years. I believe it's used in Harry Potter the most, but I think it's okay for the character. Nothing much else I have to say about this one in particular, but I think it does fit her depiction in the movies. J. Jonah Jameson, on the other hand, I want pictures of Spider-Man! He has a really nice new facial expression and a recolored Zane hair from Ninjago in brown, which works fantastically for the character. The suit itself is nothing new, we have seen that before, but I think the face expression and the hair just really makes that just a very good figure. And then finally, Doc Ock looks really good. I've seen a lot of debate on the color of the coat, and honestly, after looking at behind the scenes images and even screenshots from the movie, I really don't think there's a LEGO color that perfectly represents his coat. In the original days, they used sand green, so I think a lot of people associate that color with his coat, but honestly, I don't really think sand green is the right color at all. I mean, dark brown might have been the closest LEGO color to the coat he's wearing. It's just kind of a weird, like, off brown, maybe slight greenish tint colored coat that doesn't really translate that well to LEGO. Otherwise though, the rest of the minifigure is really cool. I love how posable the arms are, and I like how they kind of alternated where some of them have the light and other ones have that like mini grabber arm he has on the end of his claws. I think that is a really nice touch, and the hairpiece is a good one to use as well, originating from BTS, but I think it really perfectly captures kind of the messy hair that he has. Of course, the headpiece is reused from his appearance in the No Way Home final battle set, but I think it is pretty perfect for the character. Again, it is supposed to be the same character here, so honestly, I'm a fan of the depiction in this set, and I will say the best part of this set are the minifigures. I really have no complaints, and that's kind of surprising for a Marvel set, especially given that one of the figures in the set is literally using pre-existing pieces in the form of Aunt May. I think it all works, so I'm happy with the minifigs, and I have no real complaints about them. But again, sharing my final thoughts on this set, I just feel like the original set from 2004, 4855, Spider-Man's Train Rescue, was just a much more fun set to play with. I have a lot of fond memories of slamming down the Technic assembly, having it smash into the cobwebs. It was genuinely so much fun to play with, and this set itself is supposed to be a kid's set to play with. Obviously, it is marketed more towards, or I guess it's made more towards adults, but it's a 9+ set. Kids 9 and up are supposed to be able to have fun with this, and I can't imagine kids having that much fun with this when there's literally nothing to do. There's basically nothing to do in the interior, there's a few controls, and that's basically it, and the cobwebs are mounted at fixed angles. It feels more like it was plucked out of an 18+ diorama, and they decided to make it a 9+ set. It's just a really weird thing to me. It feels like it doesn't quite fit in with one way or the other. So those are just my thoughts, and the $55 price tag, while not necessarily the most overpriced set of the entire wave, definitely is pretty tough to swallow, especially compared to a lot of other sets that have come out recently. So that's all I have to say. Hopefully you enjoyed this early look at the brand new Spider-Man vs. Doc Ock subway train scene. That's all I have to say about this set, and we can move on to the next one. This set right here is our next installment in the ongoing LEGO Marvel Busts series, starting off with Iron Man earlier this year and continuing with Iron Spider. It retails for $60 or 60 euros and comes with only 379 pieces, which is not good value. There is no way around it. This should not be $60. I don't really know why it is. It does, however, come with an exclusive Iron Spider-Man minifigure who is identical to the one that appeared in the Avengers Endgame Final Battle earlier this year, but this time with arm printing, which clearly shows that LEGO has the ability to make figures fully detailed if they want to for Marvel, but decide to gatekeep certain details of figures behind expensive sets or have you pay more for a better version of the same figure, which I don't really agree with. Price aside and moving on to the figure itself, I'm actually really impressed and happy with the vast majority of the build, minus a lot of the head. I think the torso is genuinely really impressive. I love how they were able to capture the spider logo kind of stretching throughout the shoulders, all by using fully brick-built elements. Instead of using stickers or printed pieces and over-relying on that, they really tried to brick build and showcase what can be done with the LEGO system. And that's something I really appreciate. One really interesting thing that you can do with the stand is you have a couple of different options to display it. You can display it with the minifigure on the side, or you can remove the minifigure and just display it with the stand itself. I have to imagine that this is something they came up with because they probably weren't sure if they wanted to even include a minifigure at all in the sets, and then they realized that, well, for $60 they probably have to give people something for their money's worth, so we do get two versions of the stand we can use, but for me, as someone who displays my minifigures separately from the sets for themes like this is a really cool option where you can choose to display it one way or the other. Moving into the main build, again, as I mentioned, the torso work is really well done. I think that the actual angles being used for the sculpting are some of the most impressive LEGO building techniques that I've seen in a standard official retail set. It's nothing super complex, but the way that all the curves sit together, the studs on the side techniques kind of arcing in and out with clips and all different bars is really, really cool. And I'm a fan of how they were able to pull it off. There's a couple of things that I think could have been maybe a little bit improved, but honestly, I don't even know how I would have been able to do that because there's a little bit of wiggle in the shoulders. You kind of have to just get things perfectly aligned to look good, and obviously that is with any LEGO sculpture. You do have to kind of position things a certain way, but it does require a little bit of extra care to really make sure that it looks good on display. If you're careless when putting it together, pieces can tend to kind of wiggle a little bit and it can look a bit awkward, so that's just something I wanted to point out. Thankfully, every single decal on this is fully printed, so you've got a Nexo tile, a gold one, just printed with a plain dark blue print to kind of get that gold outline, which is really nice. And then on the head, you have these multitude of different printed elements, a printed Nexo tile for the mask, printed eyes, which are 1x2 tiles that are curved hemispheres, and then you have the curvature pieces at the top, which also have the spider pattern. The head itself is something I am very, very mixed on. I think most of the body does a very good job at not being gappy from most angles, but the head itself is remarkably gappy when looked at from certain angles. A full-on side profile looks really awkward because, as you can see, there is just so much empty space, and honestly, I do not envy the designers who had to figure this out, because if you asked me to create a brick-built Spider-Man head at this scale, I don't really know how else I would have been able to do that without using some wildly illegal techniques. So I definitely don't necessarily want to knock the design team for this, but I do think that at a certain scale, it is just really hard to depict certain things out of Lego. And the Spider-Man mask is a victim of that, where it just doesn't look quite right to me. The backpack is technically removable, so you can remove the back arms should you please, but obviously they're meant to stay on. And we do have a little bit of good articulation too. Unlike the Iron Man helmet, which somewhat inexplicably used a mixel joint, aka a mini ball joint for the head, meaning that it barely had any articulation to look up or down because it would just always flop downwards, this is using a standard large-scale ball joint, which I really appreciate. And of course, you can bend the robotic arms on the back in any way to kind of make it look like it's striking an opponent or just being angled in unique poses. That's an aspect about the build that I really do appreciate, is how it is a bust, but you can kind of pose it up in different ways. And it is one of the better proportioned busts when it comes to the design of the head. I really feel like it just has a really nice angular shape and design, and overall it just is a really nicely built model, all things considered. Comparing it next to the Iron Man Mark IV bust, which was also $60, it is cool to see these at a relatively similar scale. I actually had this one with me in my apartment, so I was able to do a direct comparison, and I think they do look good as the start of an ongoing series. I definitely do think that LEGO will probably look to continue these going forwards, and I'm sure there's a ton of mask characters they could do in this style, but honestly, for $60, I'm really curious how well these are actually doing. I can only see the most die-hard Marvel collectors getting these, and even then, as something that is meant to appeal to the general public, I think that $60 is just way too much to ask for something like this. Taking a look at the Iron Spider-Man minifigure, it is a really good figure. I think I do like the amount of detail. The arms being printed is absolutely fantastic, and the only con to me is that the legs are just plain dual-molded dark blue and red legs. I really think they could have done something a little bit better for those, especially if you're gonna go all deluxe, right? $60, you're charging a lot. I want to see that reflected in the minifig budget, and I guess a little bit of it is with printed arms, which is nice, but also kind of the bare minimum for a Spider-Man figure like this. I just keep thinking back to the original Homecoming Spider-Man we got back in 2017, which had printed arms and printed dual-molded legs, which was kind of par for the course back then, but nowadays seems like such a luxury, and I don't know why we can't go back to those days. Altogether, I definitely feel like the bust sets are a bit of a mistake at $60. If this was priced at $40, I definitely feel like a lot more people would like these, and people would be more excited about the different busts, especially coming with the minifigure of what they depict. But at $60, again, if you look at the piece count for something like this, you have around 300 and some pieces. It just makes absolutely no sense to me, and unfortunately that is something I'm saying a lot for this particular wave of LEGO Marvel. The prices do not make sense. 379 pieces should not be $60, even if some of the pieces are large, which they're not, and even if some of them are printed in deluxe, which sure, some of them are printed, but it's not that much more deluxe than I would say your standard LEGO set. So it's a little bit strange to me. $60, can't defend it, and I cannot recommend it at that price. That's all I have to say, and we can move on to the next set. This right here is one of our smallest LEGO Marvel sets all year. It's 76320 Iron Man and War Machine versus Hammer Drones. It retails for $23 20 euros, and comes with 204 pieces. Why this was not $20, I don't really know, but it's close enough to $20 that I actually think that out of all the Marvel sets this year, the value is okay for this, especially if you count like the two minifigs and the two mechs as being like about $10 value for a minifig and a mech. I think that's about right, so it's about $20. Taking a look at this set in particular, it is relatively simple. It's just featuring the final battle from Iron Man 2, which we've actually never seen in LEGO form before, so it's pretty cool to actually finally get that very impactful scene in one of the early MCU movies depicted as a LEGO set. Personally, I'd love to see them go back and do some of the older movies. Like, I want to see a set based off of the first Avenger, which we technically still haven't gotten. Now, taking a look at the Hammer Drones themselves, I think the builds are alright. A lot of people, when the images first released, were not happy with these builds. They thought that they looked really awkward and they weren't fun, and honestly, I don't think I'm as negative as most people about these builds in particular, because obviously when you compare it to the movie, there's a lot of big differences, but as a playable toy, I actually kinda like how articulatable these are. You've got the hinge plate used for the knees, which is something that does make it a little bit hard to stand up, like it does tend to flop over a bit, so I don't know if I would have used a hinge plate for that, but overall I do think that does help with the aesthetics, and they do generally look at least like an approximation of what they looked like in that final battle. The two hammer drones are different. This one does have a spring-loaded missile, and the other one brings back the old flick fire missiles, which we haven't seen for quite a long time. There was a period of time where almost every LEGO set would have a flick fire missile, and I feel like that period kind of went away with the advent of stud shooters and spring-loaded missiles, but now they are back, and that's actually a pretty interesting touch. I think the aesthetics of the flick fire missiles actually work very well in favor for this mech, but honestly, they're not the most interesting things, and they definitely do feel a little dated given what you have. Thankfully, it does come with an extra missile in case you lose one, which is interesting. Usually they don't include an extra brick-built missile, but altogether, there's not really that much else going on here. You can articulate the arms by swinging them on hinges and moving them up and down, which is limited articulation, but there's not really much you need to do with the arms, and the legs can just bend at the knee like so, and then you can have mimic a stomping motion. Of course, you can rotate the head, and they did introduce a brand new print for the 1x1 square tile on the head here, which I think works out pretty well, but altogether, honestly, I don't really have that much more to say about these sets in particular. I really do think that this is just your kind of simple standard battle pack for staging the final battle for Iron Man 2. Now, the big question here is this worth $23? And honestly, 20 would have been the perfect price for this set, for me in particular. It's really cool to get Iron Man and War Machine in a small set, especially because if you live in the US, you probably don't have these figures already unless you have some of the more expensive sets, whereas in Europe, some of them did come in magazines, so that's a little bit better, but for the US-based folks, it is good to get them in a relatively cheap set. I can see this being a pretty decent starter set for kids just getting into LEGO Marvel. You get basically two different Iron Man suits in the set itself, so I feel like I'm actually a lot more positive on this set than most people would be. The Iron Man suit included is the Mark 6, which is the version that he used throughout Iron Man 2. We saw this appear throughout the Marvel logo and the Hall of Armor from earlier this year, so there have been two larger sets that do include it, but it is nice to get it in a relatively cheap set, and of course you can open up the mask and showcase Tony Stark's face underneath with that holographic print. The new masks did take a little bit for me to get used to them, but honestly, they've been growing on me a little bit. I still have a lot of nostalgia for the old one, but I do appreciate how this one does allow you to have a bit more detail without having all the different pieces molded in. We get the War Machine Mark 1 suit, which was introduced actually in the Iron Man Armory from 2022, but it's appeared in a couple sets since. I do like this particular suit of armor. I think it is genuinely a really well-designed figure. The stud cannon on the back is very awkward to me. I definitely do wish it had the little more accurate version of the lightsaber holster there, but honestly, for a playable set, especially one meant for young kids to enjoy, it does make sense they did choose to go with the stud shooter for this version of the suit, especially because it is a lot more fun to play with it and actually have them be shooting missiles at each other. So altogether, this is a relatively small and inoffensive set. I don't really have that many negative points to say about it. 23 is like a little bit of a stretch, but it's not completely outrageous like a lot of the other sets in this wave, so I'm gonna pick my battles and just say that, you know what, if you like this, if you don't have the minifigs already because they actually all came in more expensive sets, then maybe this is a good way to actually get them for relatively cheap, and it's a decent parts pack as well. That's all I have to say about this set, so let's move on to the next one. This right here is our only 4+ set of the wave at 76319, simply titled Captain America vs. Thanos. It retails for $40 or 35 euros and comes with 107 pieces, which unfortunately is kind of par for the course for a 4+ set, because 4+ sets do not play by the same rules as standard LEGO sets. They use a lot bigger pieces, specialized parts, and special mechanisms like the spring-loaded shooter, which just make it hard to compare this based on the number of parts included. The set strangely includes a brand new version of Captain America, which apparently LEGO had the budget to make for this one 4+ set, but not the budget to make the $100 Avengers Endgame set have the correct Captain America. Don't really know what's going on with that, and I understand that the way the LEGO budget works is that certain waves are allocated a certain amount of budget, but I don't know, it's very strange for us to get a new version of Captain America, which mind you I'm not complaining about. It's always good to get a new torso print for LEGO Marvel, but to make it in this 4+ set makes it feel like they just made this for the 4+ set, and I don't really know if we needed a new Captain America, especially when so many other Marvel figures this year alone are really lacking in detail or just not being the correct versions. Anyway, I'll save my final thoughts on the minifigures at the end of this part of the video, but we're going to jump in and take a quick look at the actual sets themselves. First off, we have Captain America's jet here. You have the 4+ style of missiles, which can fire outwards. These are the ones designed specifically for kids to not hurt themselves, so they're not hard to fire, you just need to push them through the holes, and they also, by design, literally do not have any other Lego stud or clip or any connection, because they don't want kids attaching things to the missiles and hurting themselves with it. Moving onwards, we have a small side build here, which is just a rock hiding the Infinity Stone there, the Mind Stone. And finally, we have a very goofy vehicle for Thanos. It kind of reminds me of the Mighty Micros we used to get back in the day, which is just a gigantic Infinity Gauntlet. However, he's missing the Mind Stone from it, so obviously that's the only one he needs until he has them all. 5 down, 1 to go. You can fire a spring-loaded missile from the front of it to kind of counteract Captain America's attack, and I actually do kind of like this for what it is. It's a little bit of a charming vehicle. It feels very comic booky. It feels goofy in the best way. And for a young kid to enjoy this, I think it's a good way to be introduced to the Marvel Universe through Lego. Now, moving on to the Captain America jet, there's a couple of things you can do with it. There's not that much, but I do like the dark blue recolor of the Star Wars 4+ spaceship piece that they use there. You've got a compartment in the back which can hold the shield, and it's actually really cleverly done. So when you have the compartment fully closed, the shield cannot fall out no matter how hard you shake it, even though there is a little bit of a lip where you can see the shield doesn't fit through the lip, but a young child's fingers might be able to allow them to open up the compartment. So altogether, I think that's just good design. It's just interesting to see the product design be a little bit different when it comes to a 4+ set versus a standard set, and otherwise I really don't have that much else to say about it because it is a simple 4+ set. It's very hard for me to talk about the value here because $40 like on paper is not worth it for this set. I would say maybe like 30. 25 to 30 would feel good with the amount of stuff you get, but again, it is kind of in line with the other 4+ sets, so there's really not much else I can say on that point. Moving on to the minifigures, our new version of Captain America is actually pretty clean. I like the star on the back, and you have a very predominantly brighter blue logo, at least surrounding the logo there, and a very bright white star as well. It feels like a good mix between like his first Avengers suit as well as a comics uniform, and it's a really good minifigure to get. I'm overall happy that we are getting this new version of Captain America in a set, even though it is weird to get him in a 4+ one. Thanos, on the other hand, is completely unchanged from his previous comic appearance, but I actually do kind of like the figure for what it is. It's a decent minifigure version of Thanos, and while it would have been good to get a new type of figure for him, I think it's okay for that figure alone. Moving on from that, we can now sum up my overall thoughts on the entire wave of LEGO Marvel superheroes. I like that they're taking big swings, they're doing more things with comic booky environments. Getting mini modulars for Marvel is really cool. But the prices have been absolutely atrocious this wave. They have been all over the place. The Quinjet being $130 is actually kind of okay, and I can't believe I'm saying that for a set with under 1,000 pieces. The rest of the sets are remarkably expensive. Oscorp is ridiculous. Peter Parker's apartment is like higher than what it should be. The train, really high. The Thor and War Machine set, extremely high, maybe the most overpriced set of the year. The bust, super expensive, and the only reasonably priced set is the $23 one, and I even still think that one is a little bit more than what it should be. So I really don't know what's going on with the prices of this wave, and sorry to be so negative on this review because I genuinely do like a lot of the builds of these sets, and obviously while reviewing them, I've tried to keep my thoughts on the builds separate from my thoughts on cost and value, but it is very hard to me to recommend almost any set in this wave because of the ridiculous prices, which just don't really make any sense to me. That's all I have to say for this mega review of the August releases for LEGO Marvel. I'm really curious to hear what folks in the comments think. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? Are you going to be picking any of these up when they release in a few days? And which ones are your favorites? Thanks so much for tuning in, and bye for now.